I held the heavy iron sculpture in my hand, and my whole body was shaking like a leaf in the wind. My husband, Ikenna, was dragging our only son, Obina, on the floor like a bag of rice. Obina was screaming, "Mommy, help me, please, Mommy." The thunder outside was fighting with the wind, and the windows were shaking. Ikenna looked at me with red eyes that were not his own, and he shouted, "Woman, go back to your room." I shouted back, "No, you will not kill my son for money today." I raised the iron to hit the man I loved for 15 years because something evil had entered our house. But let me tell you how this big trouble started. It did not start with shouting and fighting. It started with plenty chicken and fried rice and laughing. It was just yesterday that Chief Ikenna, my husband, turned 50 years old. The whole town was inside our house. Big cars were parked everywhere on the compound until there was no space to walk. We killed 3 cows and 5 goats. The music was loud and people were dancing and spraying money like it was just paper. Everyone was hailing Ikenna. They called him the man with the golden hand. They said everything he touched turned to money. I was smiling and greeting everybody, but inside my heart I was tired. My husband, Ikenna, was a good man to me, but he had secrets. We have a very big mansion with plenty rooms, but there was one room in the east wing that was always locked. Ikenna called it his prayer room. He told me, "Neka, this is where I talk to God for our business to grow, so do not disturb me when I'm inside." He wore the key to that room on a thick gold chain around his neck. He wore it when he was eating and when he was bathing and even when he was sleeping. He told me, "Neka, if you love me and you love your life, never touch that door." I obeyed him because I'm a good wife and I did not want trouble. The party finished very late in the night. The guests went home and the house was quiet. Ikenna was very drunk because he drank too much expensive wine with his friends. He fell on the bed and started snoring like a broken generator. He was so drunk that he did not feel when the gold chain slipped from his neck and fell on the white pillow. Our son, Obina, is 7 years old. He's a very smart boy, but he's also very stubborn, and he likes to know everything. He came into our room to say good night, and he saw the key on the pillow. He looked at his father and saw that he was sleeping deep sleep. Obina thought it was a game. He wanted to see the special room that Daddy was always hiding. He took the key and walked quietly out of the room. I was in the kitchen telling the cleaners how to arrange the leftover food when I felt the house turn cold. It was not the cold from the air conditioner. It was a strange cold that enters your bone and makes your hair stand up. The house became too quiet. I ran upstairs because my mother instinct told me something was wrong. I saw the door to the east room was wide open. My heart cut. I ran to the door and looked inside. I expected to see money or gold or maybe a shrine for God, but the room was empty. It was dark and dusty. There was only one thing in the room. In the center of the floor was a pedestal, and on top of it was an old, ugly calabash. It looked like a clay pot that they use in the village. Obina was standing there looking at it. He looked small and confused. He reached out his hand to touch it. I opened my mouth to shout, "Obina, stop!" but my voice did not come out. His small finger touched the rough pot. The room shook. The calabash vibrated. A voice that sounded like dry leaves being crushed spoke from inside the pot. The voice said, "Your father time is up. Are you the replacement?" Ikenna ran past me into the room and fell on his knees. He looked at Obina and started crying. That was when I knew that our money was not clean money, and the owner had come to collect payment. Ikenna pushed Obina away from the evil pot like the boy was on fire. He slammed the heavy door and locked it 3 times with the key. His hands were shaking so much that he dropped the key on the floor 2 times before he could pick it up. He turned to me, and his face was sweating, even though the air conditioner was blowing cold. He shouted at me, "Nneka, take the boy to his room and lock the door right now. Do not let him come out for any reason." I did not ask any questions because the fear in his eyes was too much. I grabbed Obina's hand and we ran to his bedroom. Obina was crying and asking, "Mommy, who was that person talking inside the pot?" I told him, "Obina, stop talking and just pray." I pushed him inside his room and locked it from the outside. I put the key inside my bra so nobody could take it. I went back to meet my husband in the big parlor downstairs. I found him sitting on the floor drinking expensive whiskey straight from the bottle. He looked like an old man. I stood over him and I asked him, "Ikenna, what is inside that calabash and who was talking to my son?" He looked at me with shame in his eyes and tears were running down his cheeks. He said, "Nneka, I am sorry. 20 years ago, I was a poor man. I had nothing to eat and no shoes to wear. I was desperate. I went to a powerful shrine in the village and they gave me that calabash. They said I will have money and power for 20 years. They said I will be the richest man in town. But they told me that after 20 years, the owner of the money will come back to collect his payment." I asked him, "So what does the owner want now, Ikenna?" He drank more whiskey and said, "The owner wants a life. The contract is finished today. It is either I die and go with them, or I give them a replacement to continue the contract." I felt like slapping him. I shouted, "You sold your soul for paper money, Ikenna!" But before I could finish talking, the house began to change. The beautiful smell of air freshener vanished. The house began to smell like a dead rat that has been rotten for 1 week. I ran to the kitchen because I heard a sound. All the food we cooked for the parting was spoiling. The big pot of fried rice was full of maggots. The fresh meat on the table turned green and slimy while I was looking at it. The milk in the fridge was sour and thick. The servants started screaming from the boys' quarters. I looked out the window and saw the driver and the cook running towards the gate with their bags. They were running away because they felt the evil too. I tried to open the front door to run away too, but the door refused to open. It was not locked with a key, but it felt like a giant hand was holding it from the outside. We were trapped inside with the demon. I went back to the parlor, and Ikenna was standing up now. He was not crying again. His face had changed. He looked calm in a way that scared me more than his crying. He looked at me and said, "Nneka, think about it carefully. If the calabash takes me today, I will die. If I die, the bank will come tomorrow and take this house. They will take the cars. You and Obina will suffer. You will go back to the village and sell pepper in the market. People will laugh at you." I told him, "I prefer to sell pepper and sleep with peace of mind than to live in this house with a demon." He shook his head and said, "No, there is another way. The voice asked for a replacement. If Obina takes the calabash, the money will stay. The contract will renew. Obina is young and he has a strong spirit. He will live long. I will be here to teach him how to manage the power. It is better for him to be a rich man with a heavy load than a poor man with nothing." My ears could not believe what they were hearing. My husband was planning to give our only son to the evil pot just to keep his cars and his money. I looked at him and I saw a stranger. The greed had eaten his brain. He said, "It is for his own good, Nneka. I will just tell him to accept it. It will not hurt him." I screamed at him, "Ikenna, over my dead body! You will not touch my son." I turned to run upstairs to protect Obina, but Ikenna was faster than me. He grabbed my leg and pulled me down. The man I loved for 15 years was now my enemy.
We were not fighting about money anymore. We were fighting for the soul of our child.
I kicked him hard on his chest, but it felt like I kicked a rock. Ikenna was not my husband again. The thing inside the calabash had given him bad strength. He dragged me across the marble floor and my expensive lace wrapper tore on the ground. I was screaming and scratching his face, but he did not even blink. He did not feel pain. He dragged me to the storeroom near the kitchen where we keep bags of rice and yam. He threw me inside like a bag of rubbish. I fell on top of the sacks of onions, and before I could stand up, I heard the key turn in the lock. Click! I was trapped. I shouted, "Ikenna, please do not do this!" I banged on the wooden door until my hands were red and bleeding, but he did not answer me immediately. I heard his heavy footsteps walking away slowly on the tiles. Tap, tap, tap. He was going back to the bar to drink more whiskey, to get false courage. Inside the storeroom, it was pitch black. I tried to switch on the light, but the bulb refused to on. The NEPA light had taken off and the inverter was not working. The darkness was thick and heavy. The smell of the onions and yam was mixing with that terrible smell of rotten meat coming from the kitchen. It was choking me. I sat there in the dark and I started to pray. I said, "God, please come and save my son from the fire." Then I heard the voice. It was not Ikenna's voice. It was the house itself. The walls were creaking and groaning like an old man in pain. The wind was whistling through the window louvers, and it sounded like it was whispering, "Replacement, replacement," over and over again. Suddenly, I heard Ikenna's voice from the other side of the door. He had come back. He leaned his head against the door and he sounded like he was crying and laughing at the same time. He said, "Neka, listen to me. Poverty is a disease. I have seen poverty before and it is ugly. I cannot go back to drinking gari without sugar. I cannot let my friends and enemies mock me. Obina is a strong boy. He will survive it. The calabash promised me that he will not die. He will just carry the burden for us." I shouted back at him, "You are a liar, Ikenna. The devil is a liar. If you touch that boy, I will kill you with my own hands." He laughed a dry laugh that made my blood cold. He said, "You cannot stop me, Neka. I am going upstairs now. I will wake him up gently. It will be over in 5 minutes." I heard him walk away again, but this time he was walking towards the stairs. He was going to meet Obina. Panic entered my body like cold water. I looked around the dark room for something to use. My eyes adjusted to the darkness small. I saw the heavy iron pestle that we used to pound yams standing in the corner. I grabbed it. It was heavy, but my fear gave me power. I aimed at the handle of the door and I hit it with all my strength. Bam! The wood cracked, but it did not open. I hit it again. Bam! I heard Ikenna climbing the stairs. 1 step, 2 steps. I hit the door again and again, screaming like a mad woman. On the 4th hit, the lock broke and the door flew open. I ran out into the hallway. The house was completely dark now. The only light was coming from the top of the stairs, a red light like the eye of a monster. It was coming from the east wing. The forbidden room was glowing and pulsating. I looked up the stairs and I saw Ikenna standing at the door of Obina's room. He had the spare key in his hand. He was opening the door to steal our son. I did not think. I did not breathe. I gripped the heavy yam pestle in my hand, and I ran up those stairs faster than I have ever run in my life. I was not a wife anymore. I was a lioness, and somebody was trying to touch my cub. Ikenna opened the door and entered the room. I heard Obina's voice say, "Daddy, why are you crying?" I screamed, "Leave him alone," and I charged into the room, ready to end it all.
I entered the room breathing like a person who ran a marathon. Ikenna was kneeling down in front of Obina, holding his 2 shoulders.
He was smiling a fake smile that looked like a cracked mask. He was telling Obina that everything was a game and he just needed him to go to the special room to press a magic button on the pot so that Daddy could win the prize. Obina looked at me with confusion in his eyes because he had never seen his father sweating and shaking like this before. I shouted, "Ikenna, leave that boy alone. He is not going anywhere with you." I raised the heavy pestle to hit him, but Ikenna was expecting it. He turned around fast like a snake and caught the pestle with one hand. He was possessing a strength that did not belong to a human being. He pushed me hard and I flew back and hit the wall. The pestle fell from my hand and rolled under the bed. Ikenna did not even look at me again. He grabbed Obina by the wrist and dragged him out of the room. Obina started crying and shouting, "Mommy! Mommy, help me! Daddy is hurting my hand!" I scrambled up from the floor. My head was spinning, but the sound of my son crying gave me power. I ran after them into the hallway. The hallway was not the same hallway I cleaned yesterday. The air was thick and red. The lights were flickering on and off. The thunder outside was shaking the foundation of the house. Boom, boom, boom. It sounded like war. I saw Ikenna dragging our son towards the east wing. The door to the forbidden room was wide open, and a red light was pouring out of it like blood. I looked around for a weapon. I saw the heavy iron sculpture of a horse that we bought in Dubai standing on a table in the corridor. I grabbed it with my 2 hands. It was very heavy, but I did not feel the weight. I ran towards them. We reached the door of the room. Ikenna dragged Obina inside. I followed them, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice water. The room was hot like an oven. In the center, the old clay calabash was floating in the air, just a little bit above the pedestal. It was glowing with a bright red light. I could see veins pumping on the side of the pot like it was a living heart. The voice coming from it was loud now. It was not whispering anymore. It was shouting. The voice roared, "Payment! Where is the payment? The time has finished!" Ikenna pushed Obina forward. He shouted at the boy, "Touch it, Obina! Just touch it and say, 'I accept!' Do it for Daddy! Do it so we can keep the house! Do it so we can keep the cars!" I ran forward and I used the iron sculpture to hit Ikenna on the back. I hit him with all the anger of a mother. He fell down on his knees, groaning in pain. I stood in front of Obina and shielded him. I looked at Ikenna and I screamed at him. I said, "Look at yourself, Ikenna. Look at what money has turned you into. You want to sacrifice your own blood because you are afraid to be poor. You are not a man. You're a coward. Even if you get all the money in the world, you will never have peace. Every time you look at this boy, you will see the demon you sold him to." Ikenna looked up at me. His face was twisted. He looked at the calabash, and then he looked at Obina. Obina pushed me gently to the side. He was not crying anymore. He looked at his father on the floor. He saw the fear in Ikenna's eyes. He loved his father too much. He did not understand that his father was the bad guy. He thought the pot was hurting his daddy. Obina said, "Daddy, stop crying. I will do it. I will touch it if it will make you happy." My heart stopped beating. Obina walked past me towards the floating red calabash. He raised his small hand. The calabash started humming with joy. It was hungry for him. I shouted, "Obina, no!" But I was too far away to pull him back. Ikenna was the only one close enough to stop him.
I looked at Ikenna. He was staring at his son. He saw the pure love in the boy's eyes. He saw the innocence that he was about to destroy forever. Obina's fingers were just 1 inch away from the red clay. The room became silent. The wind stopped blowing. The whole world was waiting for his touch.
At that last second, something changed in Ikenna's eyes. He saw the love in his son's face, and he remembered who he was before the money ate his soul. He remembered the time when we were poor but happy. He screamed no with a voice that shook the walls. He jumped forward and tackled Obina. He threw the boy into my arms near the door. Ikenna shouted at me, "Nneka, take him and run away. Run and never look back." I grabbed Obina tight. Ikenna stood up and faced the floating red calabash. He spread his arms wide like he was trying to hug the air. He shouted at the pot, "You want a life? Take mine. I'm the one who signed the paper. Leave my son alone. The deal is over." He slammed the heavy door in our face, and I heard the lock turn. Click. We were outside in the corridor. Inside the room, I heard the sound of wind and breaking glass. I heard Ikenna screaming, but it was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of victory. He was fighting the battle for us. Then suddenly everything went silent. The red light under the door vanished. The thunder outside stopped. The house became quiet like a graveyard. Obina and I sat by the door until morning came. We were too afraid to move. When the sun came out through the window, I gathered my courage. I used the spare key I took from the bedroom, and I opened the door. The room was not scary anymore. It was just a normal room with dust. The calabash was on the floor, but it was broken into 100 pieces of plain, dry clay. It looked like trash. My husband, Ikenna, was sitting against the wall. His eyes were closed. He looked like he was sleeping, but he was not breathing. But the strange thing was his face. He looked very old, like a man of 90 years. All the 20 years he bought with the juju had been taken back in one night. But he was smiling. He looked peaceful. He had paid his debt himself. The trouble did not end there. 2 days later, the bank people came. They came like vultures. They said Ikenna owed them billions of naira. They took the mansion. They took the shiny jeeps. They took my jewelry. They even took the furniture. The friends who were drinking champagne at the party disappeared. Nobody picked my calls. We were left with nothing but 2 bags of clothes. We moved to a small 1-room apartment in a noisy area where neighbors share 1 bathroom. Life was hard. I started selling akara and pop in the morning to pay for Obina's school fees. People laughed at us. They said, "Look at the wife of the big chief. She is now frying bean cake on the road." But I did not care. For the first time in 20 years, I could sleep at night without fear. We were poor, but we were free. Time flew past like a bird. 20 years passed. Obina grew up to be a tall, handsome man. He was working as a teacher. He did not have plenty money, but he had a clean heart. We were happy. One evening, Obina came back from work with a small box in his hand. He said a lawyer sent it to him from an anonymous person. He sat down on our small wooden chair and opened the box. Inside, there was a piece of broken clay. It was a shard from that old calabash. Under it was a letter in Ikenna handwriting. The letter said, "My son, I broke the pot, but the spirit is still waiting. It is hungry. If you ever get tired of suffering, just put this piece of clay in water and call its name. It will come back." Obina looked at the piece of clay. For 1 second, the room felt cold again. I saw a small shadow pass over his face.
The temptation was there. Poverty is not easy, and he had suffered a lot. He held the key to the billions of naira in his hand. I held my breath. I wanted to see what my son would do. Obina looked at me and smiled. He stood up and walked to the kerosene stove where I was boiling water. He threw the piece of clay into the fire. We watched it burn until it turned to black ash. He said, "Mama, I prefer to drink gari in peace than to eat fried rice in chains." He hugged me, and outside the window the sun was shining bright. The curse was broken forever.